Reporting again from Marathon Electric's corporate headquarters in beautiful Washdown, Wisconsin. We have a live audience today for this presentation, and our subject is going to be definite purpose motors. Again, very basic, but important. In our other presentations that I've done, we pretty much confined ourselves to general purpose motors, motors that can be used for any type of application, and then modifying them and dealing with them and all like that. Today we're going to talk about the most popular definite purpose motors that we sell, which there are a lot of. These are, again, this is not limited to the ones I'm going to present. These just happen to be very popular ones. And obviously by its name, general purpose motor means a general application, and a definite purpose motor means a specific type application. The first one we want to talk about is an explosion-proof motor. I spend a lot of time in these training sessions talking about this motor because it's very important and it's very common. It is really a general purpose motor made for a specific environment, but I call it a definite purpose because it's made for a definite environment. They're always totally enclosed. Explosion-proof have to be totally enclosed, at least the ones we make. They can be single-phase. Most are three-phase, but they can be single-phase. But the only ones we have listed, by the way, these motors are UL and CSA listed for use in hazardous locations. The only single-phase we have listed are 4856 frame, the smaller ones. They're designed for applications in atmospheres that contain hazardous material, explosive gases, combustible dusts, and some other things you'll see in a minute. They're UL listed in accordance with the National Fire Protection Act and the National Electrical Code. Very, very stringent manufacturing techniques are used to build these explosion-proof motors. You just can't slap something together and have an explosion-proof requirement. Very precise machining. The enclosure is designed to be so tight, it's not airtight, but it's so tight that if an explosion were to occur inside the motor, it has to be contained inside the motor. You don't want it blowing up the building. Okay, so what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas in an explosion-proof motor. All external devices, all rotating devices, have to be designed so they could never cause a spark, because that spark may ignite the atmosphere, which is what we're exactly trying not to do. The other part of the requirement is more of a physical electrical part, and that is that the motor are designed so that the external skin temperature, the outside of the motor, in any condition, has to be lower than the temperature code that you have it listed for. The temperature code is that temperature in which the hazardous material becomes unstable. So, even though it doesn't cause a spark, you can have enough heat just from the case of the motor to ignite the stuff, and that's bad. So, what needs to be specified on a customer's purchase order to properly select the type of explosion-proof motor for the requirement? We make a lot of different types, and there are four important things that you have to have to specify the right motor. One is the division. Second is the class. Thirdly, the group. And finally, the temperature code. If a customer is specifying an explosion-proof or a mod to an explosion-proof, and they don't give you those four items, don't guess. Go back and ask. Those are the four things you need. Why? Because the authority having jurisdiction over the application, which you've heard me say this before, is the person responsible to commission the motor for use. If you send them the wrong motor, and the authority will not commission it, now you've wasted everybody's time plus money. If it's a build-up, now you've wasted a lot of time. You gotta rebuild it, bring it back, whatever. You might have just built a pile of junk because nobody wants it. Because the authority will not commission the motor if it's not correct. But with those four things defined, we have 99% chance that it'll work. It'll be all right. So what do these four things mean? There are really two divisions, just two. Division 1 is a location where the hazardous material is present in the environment all the time during operating conditions. That's Division 1. Division 1 is truly an explosion-proof motor. It always, which should be in bold letters, Division 1 always requires an explosion-proof construction. Then there's such a thing as a Division 2. A Division 2 is a location where the volatile atmosphere may become hazardous as a result of an abnormal condition. That would be a situation where the motor may be in a office building, but the office building is in a grain refinery, or in a gasoline refinery. And if there were a leak or some catastrophic problem happened, it might get that volatile to this motor. So normally it wouldn't happen. So that's called Division 2. Not quite as stringent. You do not always need an explosion-proof motor for Division 2. But, because the NEC allows that, still, the authority having jurisdiction makes that call. We don't make that call. The customer can make the call through his safety engineers, but we don't make the call. So, if they say it's a Division 2, you say, oh, well, that could be anything. I can give them any kind of motor. No, you can't. Even though it's Division 2, and it's not truly explosion-proof, you still have to build it with anything that's like a metal fan or anything that spins cannot produce a spark. Safety reason. If we use a plastic fan, which we often do, plastic fan and the guard that covers the fan must be non-static material. Explosion-proof fans and fan guards are non-static. So if you just had a plain TEFC motor, you could put the explosion-proof parts on it and it would qualify. Non-static means the parts have, when they're molded, they have carbon black in them. Carbon black is conductive. It's a conductive material. So that the fan, as it turns, would not build up any static electricity. Because it's conductive, all the static electricity would be bled off to ground. So you can think about in your house in the wintertime when it gets really dry and you scoot across the floor to flip a light switch and there's static electricity, what happens? You get a spark. You can't have sparks. Sparks make boom. You don't want boom. Can't have sparks. So, non-static. Thermostats, if the temperature code requires thermostats, and we have a Division 2, we can use thermostats, but we have to use hermetically sealed thermostats. It's a special type that's made. Reason? If the thermostat were to trip, it works. So, hermetically sealed thermostats, the case of them will not allow the spark to get out. That's why it's called hermetically sealed. So we can use those, but they still are normally fan-cooled or non-vent enclosures. Too difficult to make a drip-proof into a Division 2. Most of the time. Okay, so that's division. Now we have class. Class describes the atmosphere in the area of the application. A Class 1 explosion-proof motor is one that's built for gases, flammable gases, vapors, or mists. Class 2 are areas that contain combustible dusts. And Class 3 are areas that contain ignitable fibers, such as magnesium fibers or materials from textile industries. And guess what? We do not manufacture Division or Class 3 motors. So if you ever get a request for a Class 3, no quote. We do not make Class 3. Now you would think, well, Class 1 is harder than Class 2 because Class 1 would be gasoline fumes, and Class 2 would just be dust. Well, it so happens that grain dust is used to make dynamite, and plastic dust is used to make C4 explosives. And it is much more volatile than gasoline fumes. So Class 2 is really harder, even though you might think it would be easier. Then after we have division of class, then we have to have a group. Group is the type of gas or dust in the application. And those are usually letters. Group A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Note, Marathon Electric does not manufacture motors for Group A or B. B is hydrogen, highly explosive. If you have a request for a B, I think we manufactured one motor in my whole career that qualifies for B. So, you will look in the catalog, you will not find motors for Group A and B. And only 48 and 56 frame, for the majority, are acceptable for Group E, which is metal fibers. Typically then, the ones we have are C and D, and F and G. So we skip the others. And finally, the temperature code. The temperature code describes the maximum allowable skin temperature that the motor can get to that we talked about just previously. And those codes have letters, starts with T, and has letters and numbers, and all of those have a different value, different maximum temperature value. In an explosion-proof environment, in order to meet the temperature code, the motor must go offline prior to reaching the temperature that you coded it for. That either means it has to burn up and still not get hot enough, or we have to have thermostats, the thermal protection in the motor to limit its temperature if it does start to get hot. Okay? That's explosion proof. 4 things to remember. Division class, group, temperature code. Another type of definite purpose motor we make and sell a lot of are called fire pumps. This is the only other that I know of, the other UL listed motor we have. Most motors are UL recognized. These 2 motors we talked about are UL listed because of the National Fire Protection Act and the NEC. The fire pump motors are standard. The standard fire pump motor is drip-proof, rigid base. They're 3-phase. They're used for fire pump duty. I've never seen a single-phase fire pump ever. And they're basically used for the sprinkler system you see in this room. So, the sprinkler system goes on, and hopefully it'll douse the fire before the building burns up. Typically, they're painted fire engine red. So, not all of them, but the majority of fire pump motors are painted red. So, when the fire marshal comes in to inspect your building, he knows, he sees that red motor. It's not just a regular pump motor, it's a fire pump motor. That's what he's looking for. They are soft starts, code G or less, plain vanilla torques. They have 12 leads, typically, suitable for part winding start and for wide delta starting. The reason for that is they assume that if we have a catastrophe like a fire, we may have some very bad power shortage in the building. So we don't want to hard start this motor, have it trip if it trips its breaker and we don't get water, we got a burned up building. So they usually make them for soft start, and they're easy starting pumps. But they do have 12 leads. So they are UL listed. They are exempt from the premium efficiency levels of ESA. So they're EPAC efficient. The reason for that is they are so seldom used. They're only used when the fire marshal checks the system or if you have a fire. So when the fire marshal comes to check the system, the motor only runs 5 or 10 minutes to make sure that it's working. And they usually only come to a building once a year or every 6 months. And the second reason when they are being used, you have a fire. The last thing you're going to worry about is whether you got a premium efficiency motor or not when your building's burning down. So they allow them to be EPAC. They don't use a lot of energy unless they're needed. So, two things here, two takeaways. They are 12 lead. So it's possible that you might want to specify one for a customer who's asking for a standard motor, but he wants the 12 lead per-winding start type, and we don't have it in stock. That's possible. But remember, these are only EPAC. So if your requirement is a 12 lead motor that happens to be premium, you can't use the fire pumps. Need the efficiency, okay? Another group of definite purpose motors we sell a lot of. One of the largest service of this industry in the world, Marathon is. They're called farm duty or agriculture motors. The four most popular types are what we call high torque, extra high torque, which its nickname is chore motor, because it does chores on the farm, I suppose. That's why it's called that. An auger drive motor and a crop dryer motor. We'll talk about each one of these. Farm duty motors are primarily single phase. Why? Farms don't have three phase. Farms have single phase power. If we had to put three phase power on every farm in this country, we'd go broke. So it's very expensive. So they're single phase. They're used in rural areas. Some are three phase, very, very few. The high torque and extra high torque have similar features. They are fan cooled. They're designed for, they're fan cooled so they have better reliability to be used outdoors. More reliability than a drip proof. Even though if they're not used outdoors, it's okay, but we make them fan cooled. So we expect them to be in some kind of an outdoor or dusty or dirty environment on a farm. And the fan cooled also makes them better for rodent protection. Because if you're on a farm, you're going to have mice and snakes and things that when it's cool out, like to crawl into your nice warm motor. Well, if it's drip proof, they'll get in. If it's not, if it's fan cooled, odds are they won't get in. So they're rodent protected. The high torque motors are capacitor start or capacitor run motors that are general purpose torques. That's a high torque motor from our previous discussion about various single phase types. But the chore motor have extra high torque, 300% plus. And they're used for tough applications such as silo unloaders and barn cleaners and bunk feeders. Now on a farm, especially in this part of the world, if it's 10 below zero and the farmer wants to start up his elevator to put some hay in the barn or something, you know, the gearboxes are all cold, the grease is real thick, it might have ice on it. You need this big high starting torque motor to break things loose. So that's why they're like that. That's why they're called chore motors. They have low temperature manual reset thermal protectors. Now, we've talked about manual and automatic thermal protectors. These things are on the farm. Okay? 50% of all accidents to personnel in the world are on farms. Farmers are entrepreneurial. God bless them. I love them. We need them. But they do things themselves, and they don't always do things safely. So that's why they have automatic or manual overloads, so that if something goes wrong, at least we have the option of the person going over to the motor to try to reset the little red button rather than getting their arm taken off by some farm implement. But these are even more special. They're low temperature manual reset protectors. The reason they're low temperature is because we have found through testing, and Texas Instrument makes most of our protectors, that a manual overload protector can act like an automatic. It can come on automatically if the temperature is below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And that certainly defeats the purpose. And obviously we're going to get below 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside on a farm. So TI builds these special low temperature that are good for like 30 below zero thermal protectors. They're much more expensive than the normal type, just so you know that. We have drain holes in these things so that when it's cold outside and the motor gets hot and you shut it off, guess what's going to happen? The inverse of what happens to your beverage glass. The motor sweats from the condensation on the inside, not on the outside, like a glass would do. So now the motor gets a lot of water in it. We don't want water and electricity don't mix, plus things rust when you have water. So we put condensate drain holes in these things, real small holes to let the condensate have a chance to drip out. We put a shaft slinger over the shaft so that dust doesn't get towards our bearing, and that's what those motors look like. Another very common definite purpose motor on a farm is called an auger drive. Auger drives are single phase, of course, because we're on a farm. They're used primarily for automatic feeding of animals, but there are hundreds of other uses for them. Or sometimes they're used for automatic product recovery systems, such as collection of seeds or eggs from a chicken delivered to a central place where they can be washed and processed and packaged without a human being have to go gather them all. The automatic feeder is pretty obvious. You have 30 animals in a row in a barn, and you have to go feed them all, so you dump all the feed into one place, turn on the auger, and it delivers it down to the animals. That's what they call it. There are some issues with this motor, by the way, that we have to take care of. We always have issues. They are almost always NEMA end flange mounts, because that's the way the auger gearbox connection is made, so that they will fit. So they're NEMA end flange mounts. They have automatic or manual overload protectors also. You certainly don't want somebody getting their hands in an auger. They have special start switches. They're either electronic start switch or they're mechanical overspeed protected switches, not the type that you're used to seeing. There's a reason for that. The auger can act like a huge spring. As it's turning, it could get jammed up or clogged up with grain or rock or something, and then it won't turn. And it could be way at the end of the auger. Now the motor doesn't know that, so the motor keeps cranking away. And all it's doing is winding the auger up like a spring. Once the auger gets so tight and overcomes the torque the motor can produce, it'll spin it backwards. Okay? So the protector may not have time to trip in this situation. So we used a special switch, an electronic switch so it's not damaged by this phenomenon, or a special mechanical overspeed switch. It has guards on it so it doesn't fly apart if this were to ever happen. And it does sometimes happen. To that end, we build these motors with an opposite end shaft that has flats on it, so that if the auger were to get jammed up, then the operator or the farmer can go over to the machine and take a wrench and get on these flats and kind of jog it back and forth the way you would do to free up the blades on your garbage disposal if something got in it. They give you a little crank so you can loosen it up. That's what that feature is all about. It's called jogging. Another type of farm duty motor is a crop dryer motor. These are special designs also. They are almost always drip proof, and they are used in grain drying systems. You've probably seen them on the farm. You may have a big bin of grain, and at the bottom there is this wind tunnel with a motor mounted in it and a huge fan. And this motor is going to drive this fan and draw air through the grain to dry it out. It could be tobacco, could be corn, could be any kind of things. And they're primarily single phase, but sometimes these are three phase and we stock them both. The reason these are more prevalently three phase than the others is a lot of these grain drying systems are by a grain mill or a refinery, and they may have three phase power. On the farm you probably don't, but at the grain mill you might. So we stock them both. They're ODP air over designs. In other words, the fan that the customer has that's drawing this air through the farm in this tunnel draws air over the motor for cooling. The motor is located inside this wind tunnel. It's just like an open-ended barrel on both ends. Okay? They have long leads. Because they're mounted inside, we provide long leads to get the leads to the outside so the farmer can connect it outside and doesn't have to crawl inside to connect it. They only have thermostats for protection. Why don't they have manual, like everything else? They have thermostats because they're buried inside this piece of equipment. They're very, very not easily accessible by human beings. So, manual would be a nuisance, really, because if it tripped, you'd have to crawl inside this wind tunnel barrel and try to figure out where this button is that I gotta push. So we use thermostats for these things. And we ship them with an extra nameplate loose that attaches to the outside of the barrel so that if we have to service the thing, we know what motor's inside. Okay, so we send them 2 nameplates. And guess what? One of the features of this extra nameplate shipped loose is. We talked about it in our last session. The loose nameplate doesn't have UL on it. Loose. Okay? Another type of specialty motor that's fairly new for us are washdown motors, specifically designed to actually physically hose off the motor with water or caustic soap even, steam sometimes even. They're used in food processing where everything has to be there's cleanliness issues, so you have to wash stuff down. So we have washdown motors now. You've heard me say time and time again, water and electricity don't mix. These motors are specifically designed such that they're sealed up and they're virtually waterproof. I'm not saying you could dunk them in a bucket of water, but you at least can wash them off. We make 2 different types. Both types have 303 stainless steel shafts. The shaft extension on these motors is stainless steel because the 303 stainless resists rust. You don't want it's going to get washed down and can't get it rusty. They have corrosion-resistant coatings on their internal parts as well as the external, such that now these motors are gonna sweat from the condensate. They're gonna get wet inside. They have drain holes, but that doesn't mean that it's all gonna come out. Sometimes they get clogged. So we have to put corrosion protection material all on the inside of these motors. We also use gaskets and seals on the external part for the very same reason. Keep the water out. The conduit box has seals on it, and the shaft does not have just a slinger, because water can get behind the slinger. It actually has a seal. One type is called Power Wash XT. Totally enclosed. We build them both single and 3-phase. They have white epoxy paint, which is USDA approved on the outside of them, and all the corrosion protection on the inside. They are not used for the super demanding applications of washdown. This one is Power Wash SXT, which is a totally enclosed. These are primarily only 3-phase, but they are inverter duty rated since they're 3-phase. And they have all stainless steel construction. So they're a brute. I mean, you can wash these things down with lye, caustic materials, or whatever needs to be used. They're often used when we have an application where they're processing meat, cutting chickens apart, or whatever, where there's serious E. coli issues, germs. We have to make sure we have cleanliness. They use this type of motor quite a bit. The other type of motor might be used in something like a bakery or maybe a brewery where it's grain, but it's really not, you don't have as much issues with contamination.
Is this 303 stainless?
303 stainless. It is a 300 series. I'm not positive, it's a good question. 300 series means it has rust preventative, so it may not be exactly 303, but it's a 300 series, could be 316, 320, not sure. It's a good question. Okay, back to our questions again. Okay, who's my victim today? Kristen's my victim. Okay, Kristen. Motor designed to successfully operate in a hazardous duty location is called what? What kind of motor? Explosion proof. Good job. Anytime you see explosion proof, you think hazardous. They're used almost interchangeably, those two words. Explosion proof and hazardous. Pick a victim. Danielle. Oh, you got a hard one. 4 items needed to be specified on a customer's PO in order to properly select an explosion proof motor. If you don't know all 4, give me some. Division, class, group, temperature. Outstanding. Nicely done. All right. All right. Pick a victim. All right. Your turn. Your turn. The definite purpose motors used for fire pump applications are typically painted what color? Fire engine red. Absolutely. Okay.
An auger drive has an end flange mounting.
Auger drives have end flange mountings. Yes, they certainly do. Very nice. Now we're back to Kristen. Which farm duty motor extra high torque, 300% plus torque starting torque? What's its little nickname? Chore motor. Chore, you're totally right. That's absolutely right. Now we're at Danielle. What explosion-proof class of motor does Marathon Electric not manufacture? C is in Charlie, you say? Class 3, ignitable fibers. Very good. You do not make those. And now, we're back over here. ROX XT motors are painted special white to prevent rusting. It's a rust-preventative paint. What other property of this paint makes it USDA approved for food processing?
It's non-toxic.
It is non-toxic. That means if the paint were to flake off, you would not contaminate any food. That's what it's for. All right. Where are we? We're back to Kristen. We went through Gamut. Oh, she did one. Ready? For reasons of safety for the end user, most farm duty motors are equipped with manual reset thermal overloads. What type use automatic reset thermostats?
Crop dryer.
Crop dryer motors. What an intelligent group. Very good. There's a glossary of terms attached to this, like always, that explains some of the things I've been talking about. And that's the end of the presentation. Signing off till next time, this is Max. Have a good day.